Good evening and welcome to the East Gippsland Shire Council meeting of Tuesday the 23rd of June 2026. Council meetings are live streamed, recorded and published via webcasting. These recordings are available for viewing by the public by following the link on Council's website. During the meeting, any members of the public who are addressing the Council will have their image and comments recorded. No other person has the right to record council meetings unless approval has been granted by the chair. If technical difficulties are experienced with the live stream during the meeting, we will adjourn until the issue is resolved. If issues can't be resolved, the meeting may be postponed to a later date or time. Council acknowledges the traditional owners and custodians of the land and pays respects to all First Nations peoples and communities with enduring cultural connections to East Gippsland who have cared for and nurtured country for tens of thousands of years. We honour and celebrate the rich diversity, living cultures and ongoing contributions of all First Nations people who live, work, visit and play across East Gippsland. We also acknowledge the many First Nations communities who together continue to shape and contribute to the region we know as East Gippsland, the place where we as local government deliver services and support to our community. Item 1.2 on the agenda is apologies, and I note that Councillor Barry Davis has been granted leave of absence for this meeting. 1.3, Declaration of Conflict of Interest. Councillors are reminded that the Local Government Act requires conflicts of interest to be disclosed in accordance with the procedures set out in the governance rules. This includes stating the following 3 points. 1, the item for which you have a conflict. 2, whether the conflict of interest is general or material. And 3, an explanation of why the conflict exists. Are there any declarations of conflicts of interest for tonight's meeting? Thank you, CEO.
Thanks, Mayor. I have a material conflict of interest for item 7.1 as it deals with my key performance indicators that are related to my contract of employment. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Once we reach the relevant item, those with a conflict of interest must leave the meeting before discussion can begin, and you'll be invited back into the meeting once the item has been completed. Next on the agenda is a confirmation of minutes. Councillors, the minutes for the meeting held on Tuesday the 9th of June 2026 have been circulated to you, and I trust you've all had the opportunity to review them. Do I have a mover to confirm those minutes? Thank you, Councillor Crook, and a seconder. Councillor White, thank you. And Councillor Crook, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Just to say that they are an accurate reflection of that meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor White, would you like to speak to the motion? Thank you. Is the motion opposed? I see none. I'll now put the motion to the vote. All those for? Thank you, councillors. The motion is carried. Item 1.6 is request for leave of absence. CEO, have there been any requests?
Thank you, Mayor. There have been no requests other than the requests that we've already dealt with for Councillor Davis.
Thank you. We'll now move on to open forum. The first item is 1.7.1, petitions, and there are no petitions on the agenda tonight. Item 1.7.2 is questions of council. Before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone that when you're making your address, you show courtesy and respect to the council, its staff, and the processes we follow. We also ask that you take direction from the chair whenever requested. During public questions, there will be no discussion or debate with attendees. As chair, I may need to stop a question or submission if it's deemed inappropriate or not in line with council's governance rules or the Mutual Respect Charter. Each person addressing council is allocated a maximum of 5 minutes speaking time. There is a total of 6 public questions for tonight's meeting, submitted by 3 members of the community. One person has requested that the CEO present their questions, and these questions will be addressed first, and then the individual community members present at the meeting will be called on to ask their questions. CEO, could you please present the questions you've been asked to read on behalf of community members? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I have two questions from Mr John Butler-Cole. I'll read the first one and then I'll ask our General Manager of Business Excellence, Sarah Johnston, to respond to that one. The question is, from the basis of transparency and accountability, why has Council decided to reduce the availability of the draft budget for community scrutiny to 4 days from the 28 days previously allowed? Thank you, Ms Johnson.
Yes, thank you for the question, Mr Butler-Cole, and through you, Mayor. So, in answer to that question, the old Local Government Act required us to give public notice and advertise the proposed budget. The new Local Government Act, however, seeks to give councils flexibility to design engagement processes that are more appropriate to their community. Engagement obviously must still occur, but it must align with the principles-based approach to community engagement, which is part of our community engagement policy. So one of the things that we've heard in the past from community is that the budget engagement process is not genuine, in the sense that when the draft is put out to community for comment, there's not a lot of time to make adjustments based on community feedback. So because of this, we moved to an early engagement model, which meant we started off engagement in January this year and ran through till the 9th of March. And as part of that, there was a pretty significant campaign with various face-to-face conversations with key community groups as well. So the engagement included the Your Say survey, 3 community pop-up sessions, 3 stakeholder group meetings, and 5 meetings with specific groups, including the Rates Association, the Agriculture Committee, and business and tourism groups as well. We also had targeted communications to specific user groups, service users, and community groups. So from this, we had 340 people fill in the budget engagement survey, 46 contributed in the community pop-ups, and 16 individual submissions. So this really helped Council to shape the budget and ensured that several specific requests were able to be included in the budget that is being presented tonight for adoption. The other piece to note is that budget engagement is now open year-round, and it's already live on Your Say for those community members that want to chime in as part of the next budget development process, which will be the 27-28 budget.
Thank you, Ms Johnson. And Mayor, the second question from Mr Butler-Cole is, for clarity, can Council advise the split in capital funds allocated for expenditure in 2026-27 between carry forward funding and new funding? Will all projects whose funding has been carried forward be fully completed by July 2027? And again, I'll ask Ms Johnson to respond.
Yeah, thanks, Fiona, and thanks again, Mr Butler-Cole. So the total for new works is $31.4 million, and you can see that on page 114 of the Council agenda online, or page 79 of the Council budget. The carry forward amount is also listed in the budget, and it's $23 million, which can also be found at page 116 or page 81 of the budget document as attachment 1. So of the total proposed investment in capital for 26-27, I just wanted to highlight that 22.7 million of that is also grant funded. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was the fact that the Council has adopted a set of project management principles in November 2025, and that's formed the basis of a new project management framework that will hopefully assist us in ensuring the capital program is delivered with minimum carry forwards. I think the other part to note, though, is, however, a capital program typically has some component of carry forward, and some of this is outside of Council's control. We think about things like environmental approvals, emergencies, or large weather events that can occur across a 12-month period, with capital programs usually spanning numerous years. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Johnson.
Thank you, Ms Johnson, and thank you, CEO. I'll now ask Mr Barton to come forward and ask your questions. Thank you.
Hello. So the first one, the council briefing paper highlights that aquatic and recreation facilities were one of the top 5 topics in community consultation on the 2026-27 budget, and that the budget was shaped by that community feedback. What proportion of that community feedback on aquatic and recreation facilities called for funding to provide for the Bairnsdale outdoor pool?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Mr. Barton. So in regards to the actual survey responses, so as I mentioned before, 340 people responded to the online budget engagement survey released in January. And obviously that was complemented by community pop-ups. When we scanned through all of the individual comments, because there was 4 areas where people could put specific comments, 14.7% mentioned the outdoor pool in total over all of those. I think the other part to note though for this is that the targeted engagement is obviously part of the development of the aquatic strategy, which will inform the future of our aquatic facilities, including the Bairnsdale outdoor pool.
Okay. Thank you. Number 2, the aquatic strategy consultants are expected to complete the strategy in December, and so next steps for implementing the strategy would commence within the 2026-27 financial year. What financial provision has been made to support the implementation of the strategy, in particular for designs and costings of works, including a 50-metre outdoor pool in Bairnsdale and toddler pool, as suggested by the BEC report?
Yeah, thanks again for the question, Mr. Barton. Look, as you highlight, so we are supposed to have an aquatic strategy for consideration by Council in December, as you highlight. So there's been no decisions at this point made by Council on future investment at this stage. So when Council consider the final strategy and adopt it, if funding is required at that point, that will be considered and allocated in accordance with our project management framework.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Barton. And I'll now ask Ms. Stephanie Buckland to come forward and present her questions. Thanks, Steph.
We've got Bede as well today. So my questions are, as the outdoor pool has been in a state of disrepair since at least 2015, and community have told Council that this was a reason for not wanting to use the pool, how will Council measure expected future pool attendance for a refurbished pool?
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Buckland, and thanks for the question, and hello. It's something that we would be considering as part of the strategy, but attendance potentially would be assessed through feasibility works, including community engagement, user group input, demographic analysis and demand testing to assess the likely use of any future strategy, but again, any future facility, but again, that is part of the strategy piece.
Thank you. So my second question is double-barrelled. The petition, survey responses and councillors Buckley, Ashworth and Travaskis's public commitment to providing Bairnsdale with a new outdoor pool, together with Councillor Farquhar's, Eastman's and Davis's existing support, demonstrates that the outdoor pool is clearly a focus of the greater community. Can Council now allocate funding to obtain design and costings for the 50-metre outdoor pool and a toddler's pool as suggested by the report tabled from Beck to ensure future consultation, discussions and decisions about Bairnsdale's future outdoor pool can be appropriately informed? And the second part of that question is there also a budget line to support schools hold their carnivals in other towns while the outdoor pool is being built?
Yeah, look, thanks again for the question. So I'll go back to how I answered the question from Mr. Barton to answer the first part. We haven't made any investment decisions yet. They'll be informed as part of the strategy and that will be presented to Council and investment decisions will be made at that particular point. As to helping schools, yes, absolutely. So we helped the schools through the last summer period and we're committed to helping the schools as they need, and we'll be working with each school as to what they need for the next summer period because we recognise the importance of school carnivals in our local area.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Buckland. The next item on the agenda is 1.7.3, public submissions. We have 2 speakers attending tonight's meeting who wish to speak to items 5.1.1 and 5.2.1. They will be called upon at the item to make their submissions. Item 1.8 is for items of noting, and there are no items to be tabled at tonight's meeting. As identified in the agenda, Councillor Allen has a notice of motion relating to advocacy for the use of rail freight. I'll now call on Councillor Allen to move his motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move that Council calls for a report to establish a position of East Gippsland Shire on new businesses or business expansions that will generate considerable freight movement either into or out of East Gippsland, and with this report to specifically set guidance on the mode of transport that Council would prefer to see utilised, and 2, once this position is established, notes that it will be applied informally to business attraction matters, consideration of planning matters, and participation in Victorian State Government-led processes where Council may be a referral authority.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Councillor
Mayor.
Allen.
The rationale?
Seconder.
Yes.
Yeah. Do I have a seconder for the motion? Oh, there's two. I'll go with Councillor Buckley. Thank you, Councillor Buckley. And Councillor Allen, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Council currently has a range of proposed new developments, either recently approved or under consideration, and a range of potential business expansion opportunities. Many of these developments have freight movement requirements which could utilise either road or rail transport networks. With an existing line from Melbourne to Bairnsdale, there is opportunity for Council to advocate for the use of rail rather than road freight movements for these and other future proposals. This would not only support road safety for other road users, but it would also help position the region for more use of rail in the future. The proposed notice of motion is to respectfully seek the establishment of a formal Council position on the use of rail freight wherever possible that can be used in formal consideration of proposals, representations in consideration of project referrals, formal processes such as environmental effects statements, and advocacy directly to ministers. This notice of motion calls for a report, as it is noted that under section 11.14 in brackets 5 Council governance rules that a notice of motion must call for a report if it proposes to establish, amend or extend Council policy. Councillors, I ask you to support this notice to ensure that Council establishes a policy position on rail freight that ensures best use is made of our rail network while helpfully reducing the volume of truck traffic on our highways. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. And Councillor Buckley, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And I'd just like to thank Councillor Allen for putting up a notice of motion. Well done. This notice of motion, councillors, it's sensible. It's forward-looking and in the best interests of East Gippsland. As outlined in the agenda, we're already seeing new developments and potential business expansions that will generate significant freight movements into and out of our region. The question is not whether that freight will move, but how it should move. Where rail is available, it makes good sense for Council to support its use. Some of the clearest benefits is improved road safety, and more freight on rail can mean fewer heavy vehicles on our highways and local roads, reducing pressure on infrastructure and improving safety for other road users. There is also a broader strategic benefit. We already have an existing rail line from Melbourne to Bairnsdale. If we do not advocate for better use of that asset, we risk underutilising important regional infrastructure. Supporting rail freight helps position East Gippsland for a stronger long-term transport outcomes and signals that Council is thinking ahead about how growth should occur. This motion does not immediately create a new policy without proper consideration. It asks for a report so Council can establish a clear and informed position. That's the right approach, in my view, and it allows us to consider the practical, economic and planning implications carefully, and then apply that position consistently in business attraction, planning matters and state government referral processes. Importantly, this is also about giving Council a stronger voice. If we have a formal position, we're better placed to advocate in environmental effect statements, project referrals and discussions with ministers and government agencies, as Councillor Arthur Allen has said. So I commend this notice of motion, and in short, it's about safer roads, better use of existing infrastructure, more strategic freight planning and stronger advocacy for East Gippsland. So I hope that councillors, you'll all support it this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Councillor Eastman?
Not opposing, but I'm wondering if I can ask a question.
Yes.
Thank
Councillor
you.
Eastman?
And either Councillor Buckley or Allen, noting that most of the freight is on state roads, are you anticipating that this will lead to any savings for council generally? Because the freight that goes through moves on state roads, not council roads, and council roads would be used to transport, for any developments in the Shire, would be used to transport whatever the freight is to a railway siding. So I'm wondering if you're anticipating any reduction in council wear and tear on council roads in this, or is it mainly about road safety generally?
Councillor Buckley?
Look, it's a good question, and I think yes is the answer. So evidently we will have a cost saving when we don't have to fix the roads as much because of heavy freight movements. Obviously the arterial roads will be the main benefactors, but all these trucks go, you know, through little towns and etc. So I believe yes, the answer to your question, if I understand it correctly, that it will be a benefit to council and also economically a benefit.
Right.
Mm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors? Okay.
Well, you're happy to rephrase the question if.
I might have misunderstood.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm wondering if there's an actual direct financial benefit to council in terms of the money we spend on roads and whatever.
Perhaps, Fiona, you can respond.
I think that, if I may, Mayor, the questions that Councillor Eastman is asking are the questions we'd expect the paper to address and bring back some positions on that and some findings on that. So I know the officer will be taking note of the question, and I think that's the sort of thing we'd expect to see in the paper that's coming back to council for consideration.
Thank you, councillors. So, councillors, let me just check. Is there any councillors wishing to speak for the motion? Councillor Travaskis?
Thank you, Mayor. Just to add to what Councillor Buckley was saying, there's three companies that I know of that would use the facility. That's Buck and Lime, Patty's and Fennings Timber Mill. And the facility is actually sitting right there. It's just that the rail is not up to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Travaskis. Okay, councillors. Councillor Crook speaking for or against?
Pleased to speak in support of the motion.
Thank you.
Mayor. Councillors, this motion is really just asking us to undertake the work necessary to establish a clear and informed position of council. We obviously have rail advocates within our midst, and I would probably count myself as one of those. But this motion is calling for a report to provide the information upon which council can make a balanced and informed decision to arrive at a policy position which will then inform our future advocacy and the way we deal with these matters into the future. And I think it's fair to say the reality is that increased freight movements have consequences. More heavy vehicles on our roads can contribute to wear and tear on infrastructure, increased maintenance costs, congestion and road safety. Where rail's a viable option for moving freight, it deserves serious consideration. And for those reasons, I'm happy to support this motion. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. Councillors, I'll now put the motion to the vote. All those for? Thank you, councillors. The motion is carried. Item 3 is deferred business, and there are no items to be considered at tonight's meeting. Item 4 is councillor delegate reports. Councillors, I'd encourage you to submit your written reports for the inclusion in the minutes. We'll now move on to officer reports, and the first report is item 5.1.1, which is the Raymond Island ferry passes. Before the report is presented, we have one public submission in relation to this item. Mr. William Monfries has made a submission, however he's unable to attend tonight's meeting and has requested that Mr. Hall read out his submission. So I'll invite Mr. Hall to come over to the chair.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, on behalf of William Monfries, who's the president of Riker and can't be here. So William is speaking. I just want to convey the Raymond Island community's gratitude and thanks to the council group and East Gippsland Shire staff in regards to item 511. We're deeply grateful to the attention the council has given to this matter in the interest of Raymond Island homeowners and residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. General Manager Assets Invite. Mr. McConnell, would you please present your report? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, before you use a report outlining a proposed approach for resident access and landowner access to Raymond Island via the ferry and the associated passes. Last September, you asked us, or we in this room, we considered a proposed approach for ferry passes, and you adopted some interim measures, and then you asked us to go and consult with the community in detail, and that we did through quite a significant series of meetings with some of the key stakeholders, an online survey, and then most recently also a number of councillors and officers met with Raymond Island residents on Raymond Island. And importantly, that identified a number of issues, some of which were well known already and some of them which were a little bit, some new information that came forward through that process. And particularly what was noted was the importance of flexibility within the ferry pass system, options where someone, for whatever reason, may have left their pass at home, etc. What are the right procedures to address as we step through that, and also things like arrangements for carers who might be required to support people who live on the island. So there's a range of those issues that were identified. Before you now is a series of recommendations to set out the principles or the basis for a new system for ferry passes for residents and landowners, and importantly that retains the best features of what has been in place over the last couple of years, but also provides for those matters I just talked about, provision for carers to be able to access a pass, provisions for additional drivers who might be living on the island to access a pass, and the arrangements for those. Importantly too, in considering that, we've considered options both to keep it simple from a council perspective, but simple from a Raymond Island resident perspective, both in the administration of the system, but also in the loading of the ferry, and trying to ensure that happens as smoothly as it can. As outlined in the report, we also investigated some options around technology and some options around fees for walk-on passengers, and the recommendations there are for you to note those, and just also to note that there's some further work to happen, particularly around options for donations for walk-on passengers, purely a voluntary arrangement. As you've heard from Mr. Hall, in discussions also with the Raymond Island Community Association, we believe we've got to a point which is supported from council officers and from the community, and I think that's a really important step forward in this circumstance. If council approves what's recommended in front of you this evening, we'll then progress just to develop the detail of the procedures and have that ready to go in time for implementation in September this year, which is when the existing annual ferry passes, etc., would expire. So that's where we're up to at this point. So Tegan Vanderslick, Manager of Council Enterprises, are with me if you've got some specific questions, but before you is a whole series of recommendations, but importantly the recommendations that set out the basis for provision of passes at no cost to residents and owners of land on Raymond Island. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr McConnell. Councillors, are there questions, clarification regarding the contents? And that looks like a question. Councillor Crook.
I have several, thank you, Mayor, and not wishing to cast aspersions at this early point or suggest that a review is in fact needed. But my first question is, following this current review, how will Council monitor the effectiveness of the revised portable pass system, and what criteria would trigger a future review of the arrangements?
Thanks, Councillor Crook. And through you, Mayor. As we embarked on this review, there were a number of things that we identified as being objectives of the review in terms of that fairness and equity questions, simplicity of use, avoiding conflict or minimising conflict in operation day to day on the ferry and so on. So we're anticipating being able to monitor the effectiveness of the program, of the new system through feedback both from the community but also from our staff in operation of against those things. We don't anticipate there being a need to have a whole new review, but it's quite possible that there'll be some elements where at a level of detail there might be a need to adjust some of the procedures, etc. That doesn't change the architecture of the system that's before you tonight, but we'll continue to listen to that feedback, and when we need to make some changes we can do so through those procedures.
Thank you, Mr McConnell. If I could ask another question. Thank you, Mayor. Given the ferry operates at a significant net cost to Council, are there opportunities to improve operational efficiency while maintaining the principle that Raymond Island residents shouldn't face unreasonable barriers to accessing their homes?
Thanks, Councillor Crook, and through you, Mayor. So firstly, in relation to the ferry pass system that's in front of you tonight, because that's in effect what we've been asked to look at, there's some key steps in that which have been designed to both improve the efficiency for staff and for Raymond Island residents, and things like setting a 3-year renewal period for the additional passes rather than an annual process, which is the current, or has been the current arrangement. So there's things like that. We still have some further work to do, as noted in the report, about the possibility of future technology-based options, again, to improve the efficiency of operation in those ways. I think, so there's those two elements. What I would say is there's other work that we'll continue to do to look at the operational efficiency of the ferry itself, and we can probably bring back further information to the councillor group on that at another time.
Thank you. I appreciate the response. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. Any other questions, councillors? No? Okay, there is a recommendation in the report, so I'll now call on councillors to move. Councillor Crook and Councillor Buckley. Oh, okay, Councillor Buckley. And a seconder. Thank you, Councillor White and Councillor Buckley. Would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, it's been a long journey, hasn't it? But I certainly support this recommendation regarding the Raymond Island Ferry and the pass system. And thank you. I want to acknowledge the officers' work. There's been many robust conversations around the table, as you're quite aware in our briefings. But firstly, I want to acknowledge the community feedback we received when we went to the Raymond Islander community. As a councillor, I think it's one of the most important jobs that we do is our community engagement work. The discussion was insightful, it was constructive and very helpful. It made clear just how important the ferry is to daily life on the island and how strongly the community feels about fairness, flexibility and practical access. What came through clearly was that the residents valued a system that works in real life. They want something that is fair, simple and flexible enough to reflect the different circumstances of households, renters, families, carers and property owners. They also certainly They also wanted certainty about the system and how it would operate. So I believe this recommendation reflects a genuine effort to listen to that feedback and respond to it thoughtfully. It seeks to retain the flexibility that community told us was important, while also addresses the operational issues and equity concerns that have emerged under the current system. No model will satisfy every view entirely, and I think it is important to say that openly, but I do hope we have done the best we can to meet the requirements identified through consultation, whilst balancing Council's responsibility to manage this service fairly, consistently and sustainably. So the inclusion of options for additional passes, recognition of renters, support for carer arrangements and the ability to verify eligibility through photo identification are all practical responses to what we heard from the community. To me, that shows this is not a one-size-fits-all approach, but one informed by real local experiences. So while there may still be differing opinions, I support the recommendation because it represents a balanced and considered response, shaped by community input and grounded in the reality of how Raymond Islanders use and rely on the ferry every day. So I commend this motion, and I thank the CEO, the Mayor and all the councillors and staff for the work that we've done and the community consultation that took place, because that's a real reflection of how a good council should work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. And Councillor White, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor, but very briefly, as Riker are fully aware, I actually was supportive of these ferry passes from the very beginning in campaigning for re-election to council. So it's really comforting that William, through Mr Hall, has actually thanked council for this work. It's great that we've landed in a spot where we are in agreeance. And you know, the people that live on Raymond Island, they cherish where they live, as many who live all across our shire do cherish that. But you know, they have this encumbrance. There's a strip of water between them and the mainland, and council has supported them for a long time, but perhaps not always in the way that the islanders themselves wish. So it was really nice to get that thank you from William, and I fully support this. So councillors, I'd please ask you to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Okay. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Easton.
Just briefly, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'm very supportive of the motion. I congratulate staff on finally having arrived, gone through a difficult journey to arrive at a position that appears to suit the most people that you can, given all the complexities. I'd just like to add that I'm pleased to see the transition to 3-year permits for all users. I imagine that will result in considerable administrative savings, which I think is a great efficiency. And I'd also like to note my absolute faith that our excellent staff at Bairnsdale will continue to provide the friendly support they have in the past to people who are concerned about filling in forms from time to time. I think we've got a win-win all round. So thank you, staff, and thank you, councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Eastman. Councillors, anyone? Yes, Councillor Crook?
Yeah, sorry, councillors, I'm not going to let this one go. I've been in council 6 years, and this has been a bone of contention the entire time, and I really do honestly feel we might have solved it for now. So I'm really pleased to support the recommendation in the agenda you've all seen this evening. Raymond Ferry is a unique and essential service in our community. It's not simply a transport service. For many residents, it's their way home. It's their connection to work, education, healthcare, their everyday activities. And that's why any changes to this ferry pass system understandably attract a fair bit of community interest and attention. And that's exactly why, that's exactly what we saw just the other week at the Raymond Highland Community Hall, where some residents were forced to stand outside and listen through the windows because there was no room inside the hall because of the level of interest. So look, this recommendation before us really reflects the feedback that we've heard from the community. But I am just briefly going to recognise the broader context here, that the ferry is a significant service for council to provide, but it's also one that comes at significant cost. And it's also got periodic costs such as ferry slipping and other financial pressures. But despite this, council continues to recognise that it's important. And it's really important that it's a safe and reliable and accessible service, not just for the people who live on Raymond Island, but for the increasing numbers of people who choose to visit there. So I think this recommendation strikes the right balance between community expectations, operational practicality and financial responsibility. So I'm pleased to support it. Thanks, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Crook. Councillors, would any other councillors like to speak? Okay, I see none. I'll now put the motion to the vote. All those for? Thank you, councillors. The motion is carried. Okay. We'll now move on to reports from the Business Excellence Directorate. The first report is item 5.2.1, Adopt Council Budget 2026-27. And before the report is presented, we have one public submission in relation to this item. I'll now invite Mr Jones to address council. Thank you. Welcome, Mr Jones. Welcome, Mr Jones. So you've got 5 minutes of speaking time and there'll be a sound that's played when there's a 30 seconds remaining. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors, CEO and general managers for the opportunity to address council. As president of EGRA, which is East Gippsland Ratepayers and Residents Association, we found through community discussions that there's a very serious part of respect and public trust collapsing due to secrecy and non-transparent actions by council. Ratepayers and residents increasingly believe the game is rigged against them. They see decisions that appear disconnected from community needs, while they see insiders prospering. They see no accepting of responsibility and accountability by the Shire administration. Financial matters that have come out of this current budget: proposed rate rise of 2.5%. This in effect over last year's rates revenue, 74.4 million, represents 1.86 million. However, the tabled budget states that 26-27 revenues will be 78 million, a total increase of 9.5%. That's 3.5 million increase. Double what is proposed by the 2.5% increase. We recognise that that comes from new ratepayers and new homes that become rateable. We cannot find in the budget documents, comprehensive income statement on page 48, the amount of returned GST. The council is spending $50-odd million a year on various projects and paying GST, and it claims that back, we understand. Where is that in the budget? It must be about $5 million. Fuel cost rises due to the Middle East conflict has, according to the document, caused an $880,000 blowout. Nevertheless, this number included in this new budget, even though fuel prices are within 10% of that pre-conflict price. In other words, prices are falling, so that $880,000 doesn't need to be carried forward. Delete this number, and its 2.5% increase saves $900,000, which is half of the total rates increase that you're predicting. And I'm talking about the rates increase on our rates, and each one of you pays rates. Some of you can afford it a lot more than us pensioners. I could delve deeper into the financial issues apparent in the budget, but only, like you councillors, got 4 days to evaluate its content. Going back, community consultation matters. I quote from the budget document, page 7. Engagement included an online survey, community pop-up sessions, discussions and targeted discussions with key stakeholders. 40 people out of the 340 recorded contributed to the survey and pop-ups. 16 individual submissions were received. That's the end of the quote from the document. All this extensive data was analysed, however not published, by the administration and forms the core of the 26-27 budget document. It must have taken at least a month to assess those, that database that you've collected. The salient points that evidently emerged from this extensive research, again quoted in page 7 in the document, are communities' main priorities were managing cost of living pressures, basic services, roads, aquatics, community facilities, etc., environment management and sustainability. On page 8, the opening statement says, "We clearly heard that the community wants, but not what the community needs, nor the cost of living concerns." This latter issue could easily have been addressed by is that 4 minutes?
There's 30 seconds to go.
Sorry?
30 seconds to go,
Okay.
Mr Jones, so maybe...
Well, I'll leave you to it, but my final comment, fairly simply, is
a
this.
wrap-up?
You've had 4 days to look at the budget. I've had 4 days to look at the budget. Through your due process, there's absolutely no reason why you cannot extend this period of review by another 2 weeks. It's not going to have a big impact on costs or anything, and as such, it gives you a chance to go back to your community, to your electorate, and talk to them about the budget. It's impossible to have community feedback on a situation where you haven't actually seen the document.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Stay seated there, Mr Jones, and I'll just... councillors, there's no discussion or debate, but does anyone have questions of clarification for Mr Jones in relation to his submission? Okay. Thank you.
Very clear.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr Jones.
Just don't put the rates up.
Thank you, Mr Jones.
You guys might be able to.
Thank you. General Manager, Business and Excellence. Ms Johnson, would you please present your report? And welcome to Ernest as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor. So obviously before you tonight is the council budget for 2026-2027. So each year we develop an annual budget and it provides the public statement of priorities. The budget is attached and it gives effect to year 2 of the council plan. As highlighted, the budget is being developed in a challenging economic environment with ongoing cost pressures from inflation, rising fuel and insurance costs and increasing service delivery expenses. In response, Council is focused on supporting the community, maintaining essential services and ensuring as best we can long-term financial sustainability. One of the things that we've heard about, and it was just talked about as well, is the cost of living pressures that community are facing. And that's why Council has set the average rate increase of 2.5%, which is below the state rate cap and well below the current inflation levels. This is the balance between also continuing to fund critical services and infrastructure. It's the second consecutive year that the rate increase has been set below the rate cap, and it does require careful prioritisation as costs continue to outpace our revenue growth. It's also important to note that the rate income makes up just 51% of our income used to deliver critical services to our communities, with the other main sources of revenue coming from grants at about 31% and user fees being 10%. The budget also includes the continued use of differential rates for 3 property classes, being residential, farming and commercial industrial. The value of each property, which is determined by the Valuer General, not by council, obviously serves as the basis for calculating what rates each property owner will pay. Differential rates helps us by assisting in the equitable distribution of rates, and this year the proposal on the budget is to divide the rates up in a way that ensures each class of property has the same average increase of 2.5%, which is aligned to the proposed rate increase. This translates from an average perspective to an increase of $42 for residential ratepayers, an increase of $75 for the year for commercial industrial, and an increase of $62 for a farm, remembering those are averages. Supporting vulnerable community members is also one of the highlights in this particular budget, and we have included $483 in additional pensioner rebates, so that's on top of the state government pensioner rebate. And obviously continue to encourage people to contact our rates team if they're in any form of hardship or need any further assistance. As has been highlighted already, we are still seeing significant external pressures, and yes, whilst the fuel crisis seems to have eased at the moment, we know there's been another extension for a month on the excise, and we don't really know what's going to happen after that particular point in time. So we've made as best we could reasonable assumptions on fuel increases. The biggest exposure that we've got for that is obviously in our waste services. Our waste trucks use a lot of fuel in collecting waste and in moving waste around. We've talked a lot about the early engagement that we did, and I'll touch a little bit more on that in a minute, but we also have $54.4 million in capital works, which has a strong focus on asset renewal, which is a particular focus of the councillor group, which is in the council plan, and $36 million of the investment is specifically in relation to renewal and investment in key infrastructure. Of that, $22.7 million is funded by grants. So to support continued financial sustainability, we've got $1.5 million in efficiency measures, and these savings complement the $2 million that was committed in the 25-26 budget, meaning that we've got a combined savings of $3.5 million. I suppose the piece here that is important is that whilst we're making an operating profit, the better indicator for local government is the underlying result, which removes the one-off and non-cash items. So you can see whether our normal income covers our normal day-to-day costs. When we do this, you can see in the budget that we're actually making an underlying deficit or loss of $4.6 million. So the long-term goal here is to break even, recognising that grant income can obviously cause year-on-year changes. The other piece then to remember is that the financial sustainability is one of the key mechanisms that will identify a framework for realising future savings and efficiencies and how we provide services to our communities. The full scope of that is contained in the long-term financial plan. I think I've touched enough on the budget engagement, so I won't go through all of that in detail, but what I will highlight is some of the investments in the budget on specific areas that were prioritised by community. So roads, footpaths and drainage, we've got $15 million in capital funding for renewal upgrade of new roads, bridges, footpaths and drainage, $17.3 million allocated in the operational budget to continue investment in maintaining roads, both sealed and unsealed, road reserves, off-street car parks, signage, bridges, culverts and repairs. And we also, from the Aquatic and Recreation Reserves priority, we've allocated $390,000 for stage 2 of re-roofing of the Bairnsdale Aquatic and Recreation Centre. Money has been allocated to the World for stage 2 for the soccer precinct. And we obviously have talked a lot about the aquatic strategy to inform the future use of aquatic facilities across the region, including the Bairnsdale outdoor pool. Community facilities, we've got $320,000 to support 77 committees of management to maintain sports grounds, recreation reserves and halls. And we have also got money to help support the Bairnsdale Citizens group, secure a new space for them to call home. Further, we're developing place plans for all of our local areas. Parks and playgrounds, there's $5.2 million in parks, open spaces and streetscapes, and $5.6 million to maintain, to continue to maintain our parks, gardens and open space. Finally, we've got $600,000 to address a range of environmental issues like the management of native flora on council land and energy efficiency programs. The capital highlights, I think I've gone through a few of them and they're outlined within the budget. The final part that I wanted to talk to was that one of the council plan actions is to make financial information easier to understand for our community. So we have also developed a series of fact sheets to help break down the areas of spending in the budget on services and key projects, including a breakdown of how we would spend each $100 on services in the 26-27 budget. Also present tonight, if you have any questions of a technical nature, is Ernest Mund, who is our Chief Finance Officer. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Sarah. Councillors, are there any questions of clarification in regards to the report or the recommendation? No? Councillor Crook?
Certainly, Mayor. I've got a couple if that's okay. I'm just realising reading this first question I formulated earlier today that, anyway, I'll read it as it is, but feel free to tell me it's for consideration at a later date. So given our underlying deficit remains at approximately 4.6 million, what specific actions are likely to be prioritised through the forthcoming financial sustainability strategy to ensure that Council can return to a structurally balanced position, ideally without reducing service levels?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Crook, and you're right, it's a really tricky one for us to answer at this particular point of proceedings. So
Sure.
the piece of work that we're obviously going through at the moment is the financial sustainability strategy, which will help us answer that very question. So at the moment, we've been working with the councillor group to define what the vision is for financial sustainability and what principles that the councillors want to use when considering the strategy, and then what levers we have to use. We don't have a lot of levers, to be really honest, though, as part of that. But if I just run through some of the key parts in the scope, which I hope will answer part of your question as to how we'll get to that point. So, you know, we'll be thinking about things like the assessment of the capacity to pay for community, review of our long-term modelling to make sure that we've got our estimates as best as we possibly can, noting changes that happen on a day-to-day basis, looking at how much income we've got coming in and those future projections, looking at how we budget and if we can budget better, considering if we can be more efficient in how we do things, both from a service level and an administration level, reviewing our assets to see if we can rationalise any underutilised or end-of-life assets, and the trade-offs of that, considering the services they provide to community, or if they're not providing services, if we can monopolise on that. And lastly, considering other revenue opportunities, and that looks like things potentially like continuing to look for different grants, but also advocating for more untied grants at various levels of government. So resulting in all of those things will be recommending to Council a set of appropriate measures that Council could consider as part of improving our financial sustainability over the long term.
Thanks, and I appreciate that's a piece of work that we're starting rather than at the end of at this point. Another question, if I might, Mayor. So the community feedback's clearly identified roads, footpaths, drainage, environmental management as key priorities. Would officers mind offering an explanation as to how those priorities were weighted and then how that weighting was used in determining the final allocation of our capital works program, and finally where community requests couldn't be accommodated?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Crook. I'll let Ernest start us off on this one.
Yeah, so Councillor, thanks for that question through you, Mayor. So you will remember the fact that we're working on a council plan that helps us to renew assets, that informs us how we identify assets that are a key priority, but also we have targets that we have built in already for identifying assets that are due for renewal and how much we should be renewing every year. So the key performance indicators that we are basically on target at the moment, and we look through the 10-year period, we can see that we are pretty much meeting them. So we hope that through the use of the current asset management plan that we have, we will continue to be on target. But obviously we are also mindful of the fact that we are in a region where there are emergencies. Something could happen and it could damage our assets.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. And Councillor Eastman?
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. A couple of queries, one relating to the proposed financial sustainability strategy. The strategy that might look at possible savings across services, administration, as well as capital projects, is that correct? It won't just be focusing on services?
Thanks, Councillor Eastman, and through you, Mayor. So yes, in the scope, all of those parts are part of the considerations when we're looking at what the available levers we have to be in a more financially sustainable position in the future. So yes, you're right, it's efficiency in how we deliver services and across the administration. It's thinking about what is the optimal amounts to be putting into our assets. That goes to capital from a renewal perspective, and also addressing growth across our region, as well as how we are providing the existing services and the funding that we can get for the existing services to continue to provide them.
The projected full-time equivalent staff numbers have gone up by 13 since last year. Can you explain what services have led to those increases? Because the numbers have gone up quite a bit since the 21-25 workforce plan.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Eastman, and through you, Mayor. So there's quite a few different reasons for that. I can point to a couple. I probably can't give you the exact line by line for every single one of them. 3 of the increases are for a traineeship program that we're proposing through our customer service team, which means that we'll be able to bring young people into our teams and train them up, and hopefully then be able to make sure that they can either go into other parts of council or go back out into community trained and ready to go, which aligns well with our workforce plan and our priorities of the councillor group. We've also invested in project management and in making sure that we have resources to support the ongoing project management principles and frameworks that we'll be developing as part of, which is based on the principles that Council adopted in November 2025. You'll also see an increase in, and what this is the casual conversion piece. So you'll see an increase in casual temporary staff, which are used to run things like our aquatic and recreation centres. And so the way that they're reported in the budget is we divide that figure out to get a converted figure for temporary staff, which is also another increase that you'll see in the budget.
If I may get through there. So one of the things, I note that you are comparing as well from 2021. The other thing is also grants that came with funding for positions that were already in the project. So each grant coming through and having a position also added up to staff numbers as well. I think that point was missed.
Sorry, can I just clarify that? So with that, when we talk about capitalised FTEs, they're different again to the permanent, or what? Or are we talking about with the projects, the conversion from grants for projects?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Eastman. So I think what so there's a component of our FTE that are there to support grants, and so the grants fully fund them. They might be operational grants, and the FTE is tied to that operational grant for the period of time that it is needed to do the project. But equally, we might have positions associated with capital grants, and yes, they're recorded differently. You can see them in the budget recorded differently because the operational costs obviously go to the income and expense statement, whereas the capital costs would go to the balance sheet as part of capitalisation of any particular asset that you bring onto the books.
Okay. Any other questions, councillors? Councillor White.
Thank you, Mayor. This is Crystal Wall talking. With the grants that we get from the government, and I'll sort of use roads to recovery as an example. Do you envisage that, because we're just not quite getting enough out of government, they're sort of leaving, particularly regional areas, are running short on funds, particularly as a result of them just leaving us to run something that they started, and we get to be school crossing supervisors and pay for it. We've had an attempt to charge us more for lifesavers because we've got a coastal community. But do you think there's any possibility that government will support us more in the future? Because that's where our squeeze is coming from. the lack of support from both state and federal government.
Yeah, look, thanks, Councillor White. And yeah, you're quite right. So, you know, one of the levers from an advocacy perspective, and if we think about local government across Australia, is increasing our financial assistance grants. So there are major grants that we get. So whilst they increase year on year from a CPI perspective, they were frozen a few years ago. So we're still way behind the 8 ball on that particular front. So the advocacy piece across the whole of local government for Australia is to increase the financial assistance grants being untied funds to 1% of the total tax revenue, which would take considerable pressure off lots of local governments, not just us, as a result of things that you're talking about from a cost shifting perspective. They did increase roads to recovery, I think 2 years ago, and so the budget looks at so what we get is a $26 million allocation for roads to recovery across a 5-year period. I suppose, yes, again, we would be hopeful that that allocation would increase, and that would be something that we would continue to advocate on as well.
Okay, thank you, councillors. So there is a recommendation in the report. I'll call on a councillor to move a motion, and Councillor Crook, you're moving. Yes. Could I have a seconder, councillors? Thank you, Councillor White. Councillor Crook, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, I would. Tonight, councillors, we are making one of the most important decisions that this council will make all year. This is where we decide how to allocate limited resources across our massive municipality while continuing to deliver the services and infrastructure our communities rely on every day. It's where we balance competing priorities and make difficult decisions about what we can afford today while ensuring council remains financially sustainable into the future. This year's budget has been developed in particularly challenging circumstances, and we've heard a little bit about fuel costs and increasing costs of insurance. But it's also true that those same challenges face many of our households and businesses that continue to face cost of living pressures of their own. In response to this, Council's chosen to limit the average rate increase to 2.5%, below the state government rate cap, and it's a shame Mr Jones didn't stay with us to hear this. But however, I think it's important to acknowledge the reality behind some of these decisions. Reducing rates often sounds attractive. No one enjoys paying more than they have to, but rates and charges account for approximately 51% of this council's income, and every dollar we choose not to collect is a dollar we can no longer spend on maintaining roads, collecting waste, operating libraries, or renewing the infrastructure our communities depend on. So there's always going to be a tension between limiting our income and meeting our community's expectations. And that same community that wants the rates to be kept low and reasonably so also reasonably expects better roads and more footpaths and stronger recreation facilities and well-maintained community assets. Those expectations are valid and understandable, and our challenge tonight, councillors, is finding the right balance. And on balance, I think this budget does that. Importantly, the community has told us their priorities, and again, I believe this budget broadly reflects them. I also want to acknowledge that getting a budget like this together has been a big amount of work for the councillor group, but even more so for the staff. Behind every figure in this document, there are countless hours of work. And while councillors ultimately make the decisions, we rely heavily on the expertise of our officers to help us navigate the myriad of complexities within budgets such as these. In particular, I'd like to acknowledge our finance team and those who lead them. I also want to be honest and say that I don't think this is a perfect budget. There are things here that I would like to see more funding for. There are things not in this budget I would like to see funded. I'd like to see greater investment in the management and protection of East Gippsland's natural areas. These are local jobs waiting to happen. These are jobs and services that need to be delivered, that in this budget, not to the degree that I would like. I'd also like us to accelerate investment in active transport and do more to address the homelessness crisis. I recognise what we are doing, but I'd like us to do more. I want to see more and continued momentum behind region building initiatives like the revitalisation of central Bairnsdale, more investment in assets that support tourism, creative arts and economic development across our shire. However, there are things in this budget I'm also really proud of. I'm particularly pleased that Council is providing funding to the East Gippsland Rail Trail and has made a 3-year financial commitment to support the Orbost Arts and Exhibition Centre. The Exhibition Centre in Orbost has quickly become one of East Gippsland's most important cultural assets and a vital driver of economic activity in Orbost. I'm proud of our proposal here tonight to invest in that community. I also remain a bit concerned about the increasing number of people experiencing housing stress and the homelessness we see within our communities. There seems to be more tents popping up in Bairnsdale every week. These are some of the issues I intend to keep focusing on over the coming year. But budgets are ultimately about compromise, and on balance, I believe this is a reasonable and financially sound budget. Most importantly, I think it reflects what our community's told us matters. It continues to deliver the services our residents rely on every day. It invests in essential infrastructure. It maintains the assets we already have and positions council to remain sustainable into the future. And for those reasons, I'm happy to support it, and I recommend that you all do too. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. And Councillor White, would you like to speak to the motion?
I don't think I'm going to need the timer. Councillors, I urge you to support this budget, but the long-term outlook, and as a group, we are still focused on reducing the costs to our ratepayers by trying to downsize. But we can't take a hatchet to the place. That would destroy people's confidence, especially the people who work here. But we still need to look for savings, but we need to, I'll use the term, hasten slowly, because the public also expect the services that we provide. And if we just said, right, we're not going to do some of these things, we'll just wipe them. It looks real easy, it costs us $1 million, let's just stop it and we'll save $1 million. But what does that do to the people who actually rely on those services? So we're still firmly focused on trying to reduce the costs to make us leaner and meaner, but to still look after our ratepayers and residents, because they deserve that. And as Councillor Crook pointed out, that many of them are really struggling. And it is good that in the background to the rates notices, there is more support for people who are come on hardship to pay over time, smaller instalments and things like that to make it easier for them. So, councillors, I just encourage you to support this budget. There's been a lot of work put into it, and this is my 10th budget, I think, and there's always toing and froing, there's for and against, and I'm still working intent on trying to bring us into a better position financially, and also supporting our community to the utmost. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Councillor Eastman.
Thank you, Mayor. And through you. Look, I acknowledge that there's a lot of work gone into this budget. However, I cannot support its adoption tonight. This comes down to three core issues: whether we are listening, whether we are prioritising correctly, and whether we are exercising the financial discipline expected of us. Firstly, are we really listening to our community? We were told this budget reflects community engagement, but the message from that engagement was clear. People want us to focus on core services, roads, footpaths, drainage, and managing the infrastructure they rely on every day. But beyond that, we're also seeing strong, tangible community views expressed in other ways, through submissions, petitions, and direct feedback. Yet too often there is little evidence that these views are genuinely shaping outcomes. Secondly, around priorities and project choices, we are now seeing a pattern across multiple budgets since this council was elected. There has been continued growth in staffing costs well beyond the CPI, and in fact in the 2 short years since we've been, and less than 2 years since we've been in office, the staffing costs have gone up 14%. That is way beyond CPI and EBA. And there have been ongoing variances that I believe have been adequately explained across successive budgets, and an increasing reliance on council cash to fund major projects that may not have been properly costed in the first place. At the same time, cash and cash investments are reducing over the forward years and our underlying position remains in deficit. That combination should be prompting caution. But we continue to be directing millions of dollars into projects that seem to be often based on highly optimistic and uncertain economic assumptions, while core infrastructure and everyday community needs struggle to keep pace, and we often neglect maintenance of core assets. Financial discipline is not just about setting a rate increase, it's about being rigorous with spending, prioritising what's essential and ensuring long-term sustainability. There's been criticism of limiting rate increases. That decision represents only $160,000 this year in the context of a $130 million budget. The real issue is not about the limit, the very minuscule limit to the rates. It's about the scale of our expenditure decisions and the direction of our investment. If we're serious about financial sustainability, the focus cannot be on marginal revenue decisions while ignoring the much larger issue of expenditure growth. So if we continue on this path, we'll have increasing costs, reduced cash reserves and prioritisation of non-core and very costly assets. We risk undermining our capacity to meet even the basic needs of our community in the future, and that is not a position we should allow ourselves to get into. When I bring this together, my concerns are clear. We're not consistently aligning with what our community is asking for. We're committing significant funds to projects that aren't core priorities, and we're not exercising the level of financial discipline required.
Thank you. Councillor Eastman.
Can I just finish with the budget is ultimately a statement of priorities, and I don't believe this one reflects the priorities of our community.
Thank you. Councillor Eastman. Councillors, is there anyone that would like to speak for the motion? I'm going to go to Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Mayor. I wish to speak in support of this motion. The budget process is never easy, and this year it's been exceptionally difficult. Costs such as insurance have soared. Real inflation is well above the 2.5% rate increase proposed. And then there's the war in Iran and its flow-on effects to fuel and downstream costs. So firstly, thank you to Sarah and Ernest and team for putting this budget together in these difficult circumstances. And as with any budget, it's all about a matter of priority and prioritising the needs and the wants. And as always the case, not everybody gets what they want. But I believe this budget is a very fair one given the challenging circumstances. But I do note with concern the underlying deficit, but I'm confident that the financial strategy currently underway will provide a sustainable path forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. And Councillor Travascus?
Thank you, Mayor.
Speaking for or against?
I'm speaking for.
For, thank you.
With a qualification. I acknowledge what's happened. Things like the project management and aspects like that the council is doing, I think, are excellent, and that will help future economic viability. But I'm a farmer, and on the farm you've only got a certain amount of labour hours that you can apply. So rather than becoming to work harder, you have to work smarter. And I believe ergonomics is one of the things I really love. I love working out how to do things better. And I would like to see this council in the coming year, considering what I looked up on the internet to find out what I was talking about, and they call it manpower rationalisation process. And that includes the manpower right through the council structure. And in a normal business, that's what happens. And I'd like to see, I vote for this motion, but in the hope that this will happen in the coming year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Travascus. Councillors, is there anyone else who would like to speak against the motion? Against?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes. Mayor and fellow councillors and officers, I'd like to begin to acknowledging the significant amount of work undertaken by councillor officers and my fellow councillors in preparing this budget. A budget of this scale is never simple, and it requires balancing community expectations with financial realities. Councillors have worked and seen this budget for many months now, and it hasn't been an easy process in a time of cost of living crisis. As you've heard, this budget focuses on investing in roads, bridges, drainage, community facilities, open space and airport upgrades. I've also advocated strongly for remote areas to make sure they are not left behind, and the place plans are reflective of that work. We will and must continue to work on the community consultation and ensuring that the engagement has a clear loop response in the process of our budget, and I'm sure we will get there. So my concerns and objections do not primarily lie with this council. They lie with the growing number of state government imposts being placed on our communities. Our ratepayers continue to face increasing costs that deliver little or no benefit to our region. We have seen increases in pet registration fees, additional costs associated with extra waste bins, rising EPA-related charges, and of course, an ever-increasing and unfair fire services levy. Many residents see this for what they are: state government cash grabs that local government is often left to administer or explain. Despite these pressures, East Gippsland Shire continues to deliver. Community consultation has highlighted priorities such as roads, aquatic centres, parks, environmental management and community facilities, and this budget seeks to respond to those priorities. Projects such as the Bairnsdale Aquatic Centre, bridge replacements, road upgrades and airport improvements are investments in our future and in the livability of our region. So in closing, I believe East Gippsland Shire is doing its very best under difficult circumstances, but in an ideal world the rate cap would be zero, and the state government would stop using local government as its cash cow. I want community to know I did fight hard to reduce the rate cap, which reflects the decrease. Our communities do deserve better. They deserve a system where more of their money stays in East Gippsland and is invested back into the services and infrastructure they rely upon every day. So my objection to this budget is because more so of the state government imposts. Thanks, councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Councillors, would anyone else like to speak for the motion? Anyone else like to speak against the motion? Councillor Farquhar.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to congratulate Councillor Buckley and Councillor Eastman for their speeches there. This budget depicts a long-term effect, and that's what budgets are here for. That effect is not a good for, 28, 29 and 30, 31. As you can see on our forecasts here, we're depleting our cash reserves. So what we do today affects 3 or 4 years down the track. We can never get it back. I hope this year that maybe we can find some strategies that will address this issue, but for this budget, I'm sorry, but I cannot support this budget either. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Farquhar. Councillor Crook, would you like to exercise your right of reply? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And look, I'll start by saying I hear the concerns raised by other councillors. The use of council cash, of course, needs to be carefully and fully considered. The rate cap decisions may seem small now, but carried forward over the 10 years, they have a significant impact on this council's bottom line. And again, they are an important consideration of this budget process. And I believe what we've got tonight represents a reasonable compromise under the situation. To Councillor Buckley's point, it would be lovely if we didn't have to charge rates at all, other levels of government's taxation could cover those costs. Unfortunately, that isn't the case. So I acknowledge the challenges that I've heard from my fellow councillors tonight. I agree with some of them. And I know that we have a commitment as a group to do what we can to address those challenges. How we use our manpower, or maybe I'd say people power, is also really important. It matters. It's the people on our staff who deliver the services that our communities use every day and depend on in many occasions. If we don't employ staff to deliver those services, then in some instances we use contractors. In both circumstances, that cost our council money. And so we are charged with striking a balance between where those services are best delivered by the private sector or contractors and where they're best delivered by our in-house staff. I don't think we've got that balance perfectly right, but I think what we've got is pretty good right now, and it's good enough to warrant your support here tonight. The zero rate cap would be great, but it's not a reality. So councils, look, I hear your concerns, and I've already articulated this evening that there are things in this budget that I think are lacking. There are things that I think that we should be doing that we're not. But on balance, when I look at all the work that we are doing and all the services that we deliver, again, that our communities need, that our communities depend on, that's what this budget is actually really about, and on balance, it should be supported. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. Councillors, I'll now put the motion to the vote. All those for? Okay, thank you. And all those against? And Councillor Buckley abstaining. Thank you. Councillors, the motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. The next report is item 5.2.2, adopt 10-year financial plan 2026-27 to 2035-36. Ms Johnson, would you please present your report?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor. Look, I'm not going to talk too much to this one in the sense that this particular plan essentially takes what we've put into the 26-27 budget and forecasts it out based on a set of assumptions for the next 10 years. Those assumptions were tested with our Audit and Risk Committee. However, the key part to this particular plan is the focus on developing the financial sustainability strategy, of which we've talked about a lot. So I'm not going to go through the scope of that again, but it's clearly outlined in the plan. What I want to reiterate is that taking the base year, extrapolating it out for the next 10 years and assuming that everything stays the same tells us that there's financial pressure on the bottom line across that 10-year period, which has been pointed out across the discussion tonight. The way to look at that in a strategic sense and to solve that in a strategic sense is through the financial sustainability strategy, with the full scope outlined as part of this plan as well. So I don't think there's anything else that I can particularly focus on in presenting this particular report, so I'll put it back through to you, Mayor, for consideration.
Thank you, Ms Johnson. Councillors, are there any questions of clarification regarding the report? Councillor Allen, is that a legacy light I see?
Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Crook.
Oh, did you first?
Councillor Eastman.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. So, Ms Johnson, the 10-year financial plan, I understand a key part of it is to ensure that councils don't invest in things that they can't afford, for instance, massive infrastructure and whatever. Is that correct? It gives an indication of what we can and can't afford?
So, through you, Mayor, part of the reason why councils are supposed to have a 10-year plan is to help councils to look forward to the future and start thinking about what they want to see and what levers do they have. So it's an opportunity for them to think way into the advance and see where they are as well, and help them to start working through what they need to work through now before they get there. So part of what for the financial sustainability strategy is going to help the council to do is to ask the hard questions. What is it that you want to see in the future? How do we set to get there? What do we need to correct now? So that is going to be part of the conversations that you're going to have. I've heard quite a number of objections, which is good that you are raising them now. But the sustainability strategy then helps us to say, then what do we do? What do you want us to do? What instructions are you going to give management to get there? And this is the biggest lever the council has to correct all those issues that you think probably could be done differently.
Thank you. So to clarify with the 10-year plan we have in front of us, we go from cash of around $90 million to about $14 million at the end of that 10 years. So I'm not sure how this works, but would I be correct in saying that, say, for instance, if we're looking at some major development that might cost, say, for instance, $40 million, primarily reliant on more than half on council cash, that would be a foolish sort of thing to look at? Like, does this give us some indication of what sort of things we should or shouldn't invest in? And does it also give an indication of perhaps things that maybe we shouldn't proceed with given the deteriorating cash position?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Eastman. Look, as I said before, this particular long-term financial plan is based on the assumptions that we've put into the 26-27 budget and then extrapolated out for the next 10 years. With the current asset plan, the current renewal strategies, all of those things, you're quite right in the sense that we need to develop a financial sustainability strategy which will refresh this entire long-term financial plan, because we'll test a whole lot of different parts as defined in the scope of the plan, and develop a new long-term financial plan essentially as part of that. What we're doing right now and tonight is the legislative requirement to look at the 26-27 and extrapolate that out across the 10 years with the best assumptions that we've got today based on what we're doing now, I suppose. The adjustment piece is exactly what you're talking about. How do we adjust? Because there's pressure there. And we know there's pressure there, and we're certainly not sitting there saying that we don't know that there's pressure there. It's pretty clear in the report, as you've just pointed out as well.
Sorry. So do you find how predictive have the 10-year plans been over the last 3 years?
Yeah.
Thanks, Councillor Eastman.
Yeah,
and through you, Mayor.
Notice.
Again, they've been built on the existing services continuing at the same service levels based on the asset plan that we have and the best available assumptions that we've got at the point of time when we've developed them. They shift and change for lots of different reasons, as you'd be aware, when things do shift and change in the environment, whether that be emergencies, whether that be CPI, whether that be wars, whether that be all sorts of different things. But the assumptions have been relatively consistent and have used things like our governance and assurance committees, like the Audit and Risk Committee, to help form them as well.
Councillor Cook, question.
I think I heard a person smarter than me once say that all models are wrong, but some models are useful. I've got a couple of questions. The long-term financial plan projects improvement in the underlying result over time, but it remains under pressure for, well, several years. What assumptions present the greatest risk to achieving those projections, do you think, particularly around grants, inflation or insurance cost, for example?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Cook. So I think you've picked up on the key ones at our end that we're concerned about over the longer term projections. So yes, inflation's absolutely a risk. We know that at the moment, and you can see in the long-term financial plan that the current inflation levels are actually above what is the projection in the long-term financial plan, and that's based on a point of time. So we use the state government CPI assumptions based on the December budget update, which they use to set the rate cap and recommend to the minister. So there's reasons that we set them at those particular levels. However, after that's happened, a lot of other things have happened in the global stage. So yes, it's a risk to us. The other part, I think, is, and as you've quite rightly pointed out as well, is insurance costs. Whilst we've put significant increases, 20% for this particular budget and then 6% year on year, there still is an overarching risk of more global events putting upwards pressure on insurance costs. This is, I suppose, even though we've taken a proactive and risk-based review of our asset portfolio to ensure that what we're ensuring is the, I suppose, best minimum viable to keep delivering for community and ensuring as best as we can. The final part really is the grants and the grant assumptions. So we've been really conservative with our grant assumptions, especially around financial assistance grants and roads to recovery. I suppose the key lever for that is, and if we look back to the scope of the financial sustainability strategy, the lever is increasing revenue and looking at ways we can increase revenue. One of those things is advocating through to different levels of government. But yes, you're right, there's risk around those three areas.
Yes, thank you. Second question. So the plan places a pretty strong emphasis on asset renewal over new infrastructure, and that's obviously been a conscious decision of this council, a directive that we've provided. I guess my question is, how confident are officers that our current renewal expenditure will prevent a future sort of new asset backlog from emerging? So if we keep spending all that money on looking after what we've got, is there a risk that we're not going to be building enough new stuff? That's not very clear, I apologise.
If I may, Mayor, I think we're straying into the territory that we're going to expect the financial sustainability strategy to address with some of these questions. I would ask that the councillors keep their questions to the report in front of us if we can, and we will have ample opportunities to discuss those future opportunities in coming months.
Thanks, Sia. Happy to do that.
Okay. Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Farquhar.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you, Mayor. Sarah, one of the things that keeps me awake at night is the possibility of another fire in those bad years. Is there any sense around maybe having our own emergency service buffer financial account to cover those, given that the Victorian government at the moment is not supporting YEA and the rollout of temporary homes doesn't exist and all that sort of stuff? So could we add that into our 10-year financial plan to eventually build an emergency service fund that would service our needs? Hopefully the government would come in, but maybe build on that we have something to act on straight away, given that when you look at what's happening at the moment, is that a doable thing?
Yeah, look, thanks, Councillor Farquhar, and through you, Mayor. So I think it's something that the council can consider, and I keep saying it through the financial sustainability strategy, but I think that's the time to be considering things like reserves. Now, I think if you look into the current long-term financial plan, there is a series of reserves there, and some of those were built off the back of the last major emergency, the Black Summer bushfires, that you can see throughout the plan. I think the other part to remember, though, as well, is that since the Black Summer bushfires, we've also invested pretty significantly in resilience of our communities. So, you know, at least we've had that forward-thinking piece, and there's been significant work and effort put across the organisation and with community to help build that resilience. But in short answer to your question, yes, it's certainly something that could and should be considered as part of our long-term financial planning.
Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Okay, we've got a motion, so I'll now call on any councillor to move a motion. Have I got a mover? Thank you, Councillor Buckley, and a seconder. Councillor Crook. Thank you, Councillor Crook. Councillor Buckley, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, just very briefly, because it's a big night and lots of talking. So I think this motion, councillors, deserves our support because it gives council a pretty clear plan for how we'll manage our money over the next 10 years. It recognises the financial pressure council is under, It recognises, but it also sets out practical ways to improve over time while still maintaining services and looking after existing assets. Adopting the plan will help council make better long-term decisions, stay transparent with the community and make sure future priorities are properly funded. So I look forward to working with all councillors in the coming year to ensure that we get the very best results, and so I commend this motion for your support.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. And Councillor Crook, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, I would. Councillors, while annual budgets often attract the greatest attention, it's this document that really provides us with a roadmap for Council's future financial sustainability over the next decade. It challenges us to look beyond the immediate pressures of a single financial year to consider whether the decisions we make today will remain affordable into the future. What I particularly appreciate about this particular plan is that I believe it's pragmatic, and I think it's pretty frank in the way it's presented. It acknowledges that while Council remains in a generally sound financial position, that we also face some genuine challenges around cost escalation, asset renewal and our underlying financial result. But rather than ignoring those challenges, the plan identifies them and it commits Council to addressing them through a financial sustainability strategy and ongoing efficiency improvements. And I think that's the right approach. This plan also reinforces an important principle that we've all agreed to, that our first priority should be maintaining and renewing the assets we already have before taking on new liabilities wherever possible. And given Council manages more than $1.2 billion, with a B, dollars in community infrastructure and assets, that's both a responsible and a necessary approach. Importantly, as we've heard, this is not a static document. It will continue to evolve as circumstances change and our council into the future and future councils make decisions on behalf of our community. But it provides a sensible framework for balancing that often competing demand between service delivery, infrastructure investment and financial sustainability. And for those reasons, I'm happy to support it and I would like you to support it too.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Okay. Would anyone else like to speak for the motion? Councillor Eastman?
I'm speaking for the motion, but conditionally, and putting most of my faith in us being able to develop a really sound financial sustainability strategy, because I think that's what's really missing with this plan. I understand the difficulties in making projections and basing things on what is assumed to be a static situation, but the carpet's constantly being pulled out from under people's feet. So I look forward to seeing our 10-year plan informed by the financial sustainability strategy, and I believe we can have a lot of confidence going forward when that happens. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Eastman. I'll just check again. Anyone wish to speak against the motion? Okay, I see none. Anyone else wishing to speak for the motion? Okay, thank you, councillors. I'll now put the motion to the vote. All those councillors for? For. Thank you, councillors. The motion is carried. The next report is item 5.2.3, adopt the 4-year revenue and rating plan of 2026-27 to 29-2030. Thank you, Ms Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. So as you're all very clearly aware, we provide a wide range of services and facilities to our community. To do this, we obviously must collect revenue to cover the cost of delivering these services. Revenue sources include rates and charges, including waste charges, grants from other levels of government, statutory fees and fines, user fees, contributions, both cash and non-cash, and other revenue. Think of things like sale of assets and interest on investments. Rates and charges are obviously the most significant source of income, accounting for 51% of the total revenue. The plan explains how we calculate the revenue needed to fund our activities and how this will be divided between ratepayers and other users of services. So it talks about decisions made in relation to rating options to ensure equity and fairness in the distribution of rates, and it also outlines the principles used in decision making for other revenue sources such as fees and charges. It's really important to note that the plan's not about revenue targets, it's just how we are dividing those across ratepayers and users of services. Touched on it a couple of times, but I want to make sure that it's really clear to the councillor group that the mechanism that this council used to assist with equitable distribution of rates is differential rating. In the plan, it outlines the different classes of properties that differential rates apply to, and it talks to the distribution of those being set at a rate that makes sure that the 3 different classes get a 2.5% increase, which is aligned to the rate cap for 26-27. You can also see a table in the report that shows the rate distribution between those classes, which has been consistent since about 2022. The only other thing I wanted to highlight as part of this particular plan is that any ratepayer or anyone who's experiencing any financial hardship, we're here to help. We've got a whole series of things that we can do to help people as part of our outlined under our financial hardship policy, and we also offer numerous payment arrangements, including being able to make smaller amounts of payments on your rates over a longer period of time. So that's all I wanted to say on that particular one. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Ms Johnson. Councillors, are there any questions of clarification of the report? Councillor Farquhar.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you, Mayor. Sarah, just with the waste levy, we've got the proposed state direction to have a 4th bin. Has that been calculated into the waste levy, or is that going to be a separate charge?
Thank you, Councillor Farquhar. I'm not the best person to answer that question, but Stuart is, so just hold that thought.
Thanks, Councillor Farquhar. The waste levy for next year is focused on the services we are providing next year. The 4th bin rollout, assuming that Council's advocacy in relation to class collection doesn't result in a change and we need to roll out a 4th bin, that would occur in subsequent years, and so it would be factored into the waste levy or waste charges in later years, so it's not factored in for next financial year.
Thank you, Councillor Farquhar. And Councillor Cook.
Yeah, I'll start by saying, look, I think I had more interest from the community around this particular element of our financial system than the budget itself. So I'm just going to ask a couple of questions that have been coming to me for anyone who might be watching at home. The rates and charges provide around 51% of council revenue. How does council assess whether the current differential rating model remains equitable between the different classes, so that's the residential, commercial, industrial, farming, over the life of the plan?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Cook, and good question, and through you, Mayor, obviously. So there's a whole series of principles outlined in the rating and revenue plan, as well as part of the annual review process that the councillors go through to set different differential rates. So the differential rates are designed to ensure a fair distribution of the rating burden when we consider property valuations, land use and level of services provided to each different property type, recognising that those different types of property have different benefits that are associated with them. The annual reassessment that we do links the updated property valuations that the Valuer General have given us and reviews the impact across each property class. So this means that the movements in valuations do not create unintended shifts in the burden between the 3 classes. The fact that the distribution between the property classes has been consistent since 2022 gives us an indication that the model is applying somewhat fairly, or as fairly as we possibly can get it to operate at this particular point. I suppose fairness is one of the pieces that we use when we consider differential rates and how they apply when you review the model. So you look at fairness, equity, capacity to pay, benefit received, simplicity and predictability. So the other piece that's important is that we don't want to have rate shocks as part of any particular rating decision that we're making, and that the way that council's designed it in this particular plan helps reduce rating shocks and maintain that equity across the 3 different classes.
Thank you. My other question relates to rate capping. I've had a few questions where I've maybe done the best job at explaining it, so I'll ask a question that goes to that specifically, but I appreciate it might be a little bit outside of the scope here. So rate capping continues to constrain revenue growth while costs increase faster than CPI. So this is the crunch between our income and what we have to spend to deliver services. What mechanisms does council have available to maintain service levels if that gap continues to widen in future years?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Crook. And I think I'm going to get bingo for financial sustainability strategy tonight. So I think the answers to that lie in what we talked about earlier as part of the development of financial sustainability strategy, because you are quite right, there is a gap and it continues to grow. So if we think about the levers, and just running through a few that we've talked about, continuing to find efficiencies in how we do things, exploring other revenue opportunities, reviewing our assets to see if we're utilising in the right way for services or moving on end-of-life assets, sourcing and continuing to source grants to deliver projects and programs for community, and advocating for further funding, are just some of a selection of things that we'll go through as part of the development of that strategy to helpfully address the risk that you've outlined.
Thank you.
Councillor Eastman?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and through you. Thanks, Sarah. Councillor Crook referred to differential rating strategies, and I've just been looking at different ones across different councils. And for instance, Port Phillip has vacant, residential, commercial, industrial, derelict and unactivated retail. And La Trobe has similar ones, but they also have differential rates for retirement villages and cultural and recreational land, with different rates applying to whether a venue's gaming or not. Do you anticipate a time when we might have a broader range of differential rates? And in that I include the fairly rapid move towards changes in different types of use of farmland. I think it's called Section 2 uses, what you call it? Or, so I'm just wondering about whether we might look at different differential rating categories across East Gippsland. There's so many to choose from.
Yeah, look, thanks, Councillor Eastman, and through you, Mayor. It's certainly something that we have had conversations about, and is something that we're open to considering based on councillor guidance on how that wants to shape up. Differential rating has some complexity to it, so you need to work through it in quite a structured and engaged way before you were to make changes. And you need to consider the administrative burden of a differential rate and adding another category, and how you define that category in a legal way that makes the act with the benefits that you propose. Again, going back to the principles in the R&R plan that we've outlined here tonight too. So the answer is yes, but with consultation and direction from the councillor group.
Thank you.
Any other questions, councillors? Okay. There's a recommendation in the report, so I'll call on a move of the motion. Thank you, Councillor Crook. And do I have a seconder for the motion? Thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillor Crook, would you like to speak to the motion?
I'd be glad to, Mayor. Thank you. Councillors, at its core, this plan needs to be, and I think is, about fairness. This is about how we raise money to deliver services for the same people that we raise the money from. But it's also about certainty, and it also needs to consider equity. It sets out how we generate the revenue needed to deliver those services and infrastructure while ensuring that revenue is collected in a way that's equitable and consistent across the municipality. Discussions about rates are never easy. We all understand the pressures facing households and businesses across East Gippsland, and that's why decisions around revenue have to be approached, as I think we are here, carefully and responsibly. At the same time, we need to recognise that rates and charges provide approximately just over half of council's income and remain a significant foundation which many essential services require if we need to continue to deliver them. The reality is that the roads we drive on, the waste we collect, the recreation facilities we enjoy, the libraries we operate and the community assets we maintain all require ongoing investment. A sustainable revenue base is essential if we're going to continue to provide those services and continue to meet communities' expectations. I believe this plan strikes a reasonable balance between affordability for ratepayers and council's responsibility to maintain financial sustainability. I think it aligns with our broader financial planning framework, provides certainty for our community and supports our ability to continue delivering value into the future. And for those reasons, I'm happy to support it, and I'd ask that you do too.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. And Councillor Allen, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I think we've talked a lot about underlying deficits and sustainability and financial strategies, etc., but it all starts with our rating strategy. This is a very, very important policy that we've got to have, and so I can mend this to my fellow councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Okay. Would any other councillor like to speak for the motion? Any other councillor like to speak against the motion? Okay. I'll now put the motion to the vote. All those for? Thank you, councillors. The motion is carried. The last report in the open meeting agenda tonight is item 5.2.4, Endorse Draft Revised Chief Executive Officer Employment and Remuneration Policy. Thank you, Ms Johnson.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor. So there's a legislative requirement under Section 45 of the Local Government Act to develop, adopt and keep in force a Chief Executive Officer Employment and Remuneration Policy. The policy provides direction on Council's commitment to the application of good governance, transparency and fairness in all matters relating to the employment, management and remuneration of the Chief Executive Officer. It also includes it ensures that Council meets its obligations to support the ongoing performance of the CEO through professional development, performance planning and recognition. The committee, the CEO Employment and Remuneration Committee, have supported the recommended changes to the policy, and we have also got independent legal advice on this particular policy and included one request to have a annual committee performance review, as well as a recommendation from a municipal monitor report into the Colac-Otway Shire Council. Sorry, I'm getting my words twisted now. The proposed changes have been detailed in a table in the report, and I think that's all I need to say on this particular one. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Ms Johnson. Councillors, are there any questions in relation to the report? Councillor Crook?
I'm interested in how the proposed policy ensures an appropriate balance between councillor oversight of the CEO's performance, but also maintaining that clear operational independence for the Chief Executive.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Crook, and through you, Mayor. So there's a couple of parts to that. So if we think about how the policy supports that particular bit, it's got clearly defined governance roles in the decision-making structures, with the council oversight is collectively exercised through the committee, which monitors the performance, reviews remuneration and makes recommendations to council. And then obviously the council group is charged with making the final decisions on all of those things that I just talked about. The policy also reinforces the councillor's role is about setting expectations and reviewing outcomes rather than managing the day-to-day operations of the business. So there's obviously discussion in the policy about the performance plan, KPIs and the annual review process, meaning that the CEO is held accountable with clear direction from the councillors with that governance piece in mind. The other piece that's important to note is that there's the inclusion of independent members, and which gives the committee a level of further independence and strengthens the advice that they're giving through to the councillor group on all the things that are contained in the policy as well. I think that's about all. Thank you, Councillor Crook.
Thanks for the response. If I might ask another question. I'm interested in, I guess, making sure that we're keeping up with the expectations of the sector, doing the right thing by our council, the CEO and the community. So I'm interested in what benchmarking processes we've used when considering this policy and its review to ensure those outcomes remain consistent with comparable Victorian councils and relevant government guidance.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Crook. So if you look through the policy cites, going back to the Local Government Act, that the council must have regard to the Victorian Government Wages Policy determination, which is issued through the Victorian Independent Remuneration Tribunal, or VERT, which includes executive remuneration bands that apply across the Victorian public sector. So that's kind of the benchmarking piece that's done. It's obviously done in collaboration with the committee and with the independent chair, who can source other parts of relevant information. That is then considered by the committee with a recommendation put through to the full council group. There are other independent benchmark reports that are done by various different bodies. They're taken into account as well as part of that, but the key part really is that Victorian Independent Remuneration Tribunal piece.
Very good, thank you.
And Councillor Buckley?
Yes, thank you. I'm just curious for the reason for changing the CEO reappointment timing to a flexible period of between 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Buckley. It's a really good question. It's one that we considered. So as part of the legal advice that we got on this, it was pointed out to us that we should have a time frame within the policy to give really clear guidance for the councillors and the committee, and as well as the CEO on that reappointment piece. When we actually looked at the time frames, it came right up within the caretaker period, and so when we considered that, we went, well, councillors are going to struggle to make decisions like that in a caretaker period. We went back to a flexible approach that gave us a little bit more ability to be able to, or for the committee to be able to make a recommendation to council as part of that within the time period that decisions can be made in a fair and transparent way.
Thank you.
Any other questions, councillors? Okay, we have a recommendation in the report, so I'll now call on any councillor to move a motion. Councillors? Could I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Crook, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I'm happy to support the adoption of this policy. While it may not attract the same level of public attention as the budget or major infrastructure projects, it's pretty important from a governance perspective, because it helps council have a clear, transparent and accountable framework for managing one of its most significant responsibilities, which is the employment, performance and remuneration of its Chief Executive Officer. What I particularly appreciate about this policy is that it clearly sets out the processes for recruitment, appointment, performance monitoring, remuneration reviews and succession arrangements, provides certainty for councillors, clarity for the CEO and confidence for the community that these matters will be managed professionally and consistently. The policy also reflects the principles of good governance set out in the Local Government Act by ensuring transparency, accountability, merit-based decision-making and others that are embedded throughout this process. Importantly, strong governance, councillors, is not just about managing risk. It's about creating the conditions for a high-performing organisation. A clear framework helps support a productive relationship between council and the CEO while ensuring that expectations, responsibilities and performance measures are well understood. I'd like to also acknowledge the work undertaken in rewriting and updating this policy to ensure that it remains contemporary, compliant and aligned with best practice expectations. For those reasons, I'm happy to support this policy, and again, I'd ask you to do the same.
Thank you, Councillor Crook. And Councillor Farquhar, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor, and through you, Mayor. Again, thank you, Sarah, for the work that's been done and the committee that's put all this together. And I think the minor changes that have been done, which are some were accepted and some not accepted, so I think it's a great thing to actually update this policy. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Farquhar. Is the motion opposed? Okay. And would any other councillor like to speak for the motion? Okay. Any other councillor like to speak against the motion? Okay, thank you, councillors. I'll now put the motion to the vote. All those for? Thank you, councillors. The motion is carried. Next on the agenda is item number 6, which is urgent business. CEO, I believe there is no urgent business for tonight's meeting.
Thank you, Mayor. No urgent business.
We have one item listed on the agenda as confidential business. Councillors, I'll need a motion that council close the meeting to the public in accordance with the provision of section 66(2) of the Local Government Act 2020 to consider the following item 7.1, a personnel matter. Do I have a mover for the motion? Oh, marvellous. Thank you, Councillor Buckley and Councillor Allen. Councillor Buckley, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Allen?
No, thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Is the motion opposed? Thank you, councillors. I'll put the motion to the vote. All those for? Thank you, councillors. The motion is carried. Members of the gallery, we'll now need to move into the confidential business. I'd like to thank those that were in the gallery for your attendance tonight and ask that you exit the chamber and make your way outside. Thank you for your attendance. Thank you to those Thank you, Councillor Crook. Apologies. Thank you, councillors. This concludes the proceedings for tonight's meeting. Thanks to everyone who attended in the public gallery and for those who watched online. I'll now declare the meeting closed.